In seeking to talk about success or how to realize your full potential, or how to be successful, we have taken lessons that Paul teaches us in the book of Philippians. Paul, we must admit, was a success himself. God told him right at his conversion that he had a calling, he had a mission for him, and he did that mission splendidly. Although we have to rely on the records of history and the Bible, no one else seems to have done as much within that first century of spreading Christianity, moving from place to place. He kept to his purpose as given by Ananias at his conversion, and he was consistent. He kept to it, he was consistent with it, and he was daring. And as he moved from new ground to new ground, in the process he suffered. He says he was beaten several times. 40 lashes less one. You can imagine even what that 9 lashes would be in the Roman world. And yet he was a very bright person, very, very gifted, very educated. And God used his gifts in order to accomplish the many things that he finally, we know he actually accomplished. We have said, therefore, if you are to learn from Paul, we also have clarity of our calling and understand success is not comparing yourself with others. Success is doing what you are created to do. Whether it looks big to others, doesn't look big to others, is irrelevant. Are you doing what you are called to do to the best of your ability? If the answer is yes, you are a success, even if nobody regards you as one. And we need to understand that this is a very, very important topic, because whatever you define as your success is going to be your motivator. It's going to drive you. And if it's wrong, if your definition of success is wrong, your life will also be a mess. And so it's important that you identify clearly what your calling is and then keep to it. Do whatever needs to be done to ensure by the time you die, you feel you have discharged your responsibility, what was given as your calling. That's really going to make your going home a happy thing, your retirement years a happy time, your old age something you can rejoice on, because as you look back and see how God has used you, that's going to certainly be something that you would enjoy in your twilight years. So we have emphasized that the first thing you must do is spend enough time discovering your life's purpose. And the earlier you discover it, the better. However, even if you're in your 60s, you would understand if you discover it, there's still time to perform it. Isn't that what you are told? Kentucky Chicken was begun by a guy in his 60s. That's when he discovered his life's purpose, to provide tasty chicken to people. And he did that, and that's the legacy he left. Kentucky Chicken is still running around many years after he died. And yet he discovered his passion, his calling, old age. So you shouldn't say, but I'm old. No. At whatever age you are, I think it's important to clarify what is your life's purpose. What is it that it is? Because then you can define what success is. Because success is not being like your mother or like your father or like your uncle or like your son or your daughter. No, you have a unique purpose for which you are created. And we also say that that unique purpose doesn't have to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with other people. You are created not to meet your own personal needs, because that's a very small requirement, but to meet other people's needs. So when you talk about calling, is what need in others were you created to solve, to resolve? And I think that's something that you have to clarify. So that's what we have been emphasizing. And on this fifth part, we want to emphasize the fact that you need to be a man of values. And you have talked about it before. So in this concluding part, we'll be repeating ourselves. You have said, be a man of your core values. Be a man of integrity. You have talked about it before. Look at Philippians chapter 1, verse 27. Whatever happens, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. In other words, you should not be a man of excuses. Avoid excuses. Be a man of integrity. And one of the meanings of that is you do not look for excuses. It's all right. Somebody said that all right means it's an uttered right. In other words, you suspect there's something wrong with it. But given the circumstances, it's all right. In other words, it's an uttered right. It's not really right. But the circumstances are such that we are saying, no, the excuses will not do. All right or uttered right is not the way to go if you want to be a success. You're saying whatever happens means don't create circumstances. Say, but look at my background. I keep telling people, the moment you find an excuse, you have defined yourself as a failure. Because the moment you find somebody to blame, you cease looking for solutions. I'm not the one to blame. So-and-so is to blame. Oh, my mother. Oh, my father. Oh, the kind of school I went to. Like I was telling some people the other day, if you can't speak good English and you keep blaming it on your parents and you keep blaming it on your schools, not after the internet has come. Some time back, we went to Mozambique, Maputo, and the car driver, who is a taxi driver who took us around, was talking to us in English. The country speaks Portuguese. So he wanted to find out, how did you learn? And he talked about using the internet. He even gave us the link if you want to learn Portuguese. And he says it teaches you the spelling, teaches you the language, teaches you the pronunciations. And if you are committed, the next time he gets, because he's in tax business, he gets some tourists who can't speak Portuguese. He just speaks them and talks to them from what he is learning, then goes, revises. And now we had a good time moving around Maputo with him, talking good English to us. So can you see, if he had said the excuse was, but I come from a Portuguese, and then there are a lot of tourists are coming who can't speak Portuguese, he would lose the business. He even told us that he acted in one of the Hollywood films because they wanted to shoot it in Maputo, and they needed somebody who can speak English. I don't know if he acted or he was involved in carrying them, whatever, but he sees the film as one of it. It's unfortunate that I'm not a films man, so I couldn't know the film. But have you seen this particular film? He was excited. I'm giving you all that story in order to tell you, the moment you blame what happens, you stop fighting your way through. So you need to, it may be true, actually, your upbringing is a problem, but the fact that you have not changed, the fact that you have not resolved it, is your responsibility. Nothing to do with your past. So we are not suggesting that the past can't affect you. What you are saying, it cannot jail you. We are not suggesting that your past cannot interfere with your success. All we say is that you can reverse it. You can deal with it. Whatever happens, whatever your circumstances, you can move on. And that's one of the things that helped the young boy David to learn. A bear, a lion will come for his sheep. He would fight it, believing that God can help him. And he was able to save his father's sheep from lions, from bears. That's a small boy. So when he saw Goliath, a man double the size of many, and he's saying, who among you Israelites? Come, let's fight. And obviously nobody was his size. The fact that he had learned not to give excuses, this is a lion or this one, gave him courage, because he had, God helped me there. I'm not much for a bear. I'm not much for a lion. I didn't know how a bear looks like until recently when I went to Nanyuki in a game reserve to see a bear. Sure enough, it's a big animal. When it rises up to, it's many meters high. Can you imagine a small boy fighting a bear? But David had learned you can do it with God's help. So when Goliath came, he had no excuses. He just said, oh, he's big. No, I have a God who can help me. That's what he told the king. And he went on. They tried to give him big armaments. He was not used to it. He had no excuse. So if there's something that's going to help you in life, is for sure identify what your shortcomings and weaknesses are, but don't use them as an excuse. Find out how you can manage those weaknesses and move on. And there are many ways of managing weaknesses. Retrain, but sometimes it's partner with somebody else who is gifted in it and move on. Excuses will not do. So Paul is saying, whatever happens, whatever circumstances you have, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. You have no excuse even to be involved in evil. Oh, but that girl came, her dress was so short. Oh no, it was too short from below and too low from above, and she started touching me. And my friend, why don't you think of Joseph, who the person interested in him was not just another girl passing. It was the boss. And the husband has gone far away. There's just the two of them. The woman makes sure she has organized so that nobody else is in that house. Nobody else saw the scene. And he says, I love you, I need you. Come sleep with me. He would have given an excuse. I'm a slave. I have to do exactly what the master says. It's too risky not to do what the boss says as a slave. But he had no excuse. He risked his life in order to please God. He had no excuse. So he says no, but no was not enough. He takes hold of him and he pulls out and leaves her with a cloak. I don't know. I hope he was not naked as he ran away. But then he knew he has gotten himself into trouble. A jilted woman, he certainly was going to have trouble, and trouble he got. By the time she comes, she's crying to the husband, and what a terrible supervisor of slaves you gave a job. And obviously, he was not given a chance to defend himself. So he ended up in jail, in prison, because he could not give excuses in order to get involved in wrong things. So my friend, Philippians 4:27, Philippians chapter 1 verse 27 is saying, whatever happens, don't have an excuse. Conduct yourself in a manner worthy of a person who has been called by Christ, worthy of a person who claims to have the gospel. That tells you have no excuse. Oh, but my business, it will collapse. You know, Kenya is such a corrupt country. You can never do a sexual business without compromise. The Bible is saying, whatever happens, whatever circumstances, however corrupt the country is, you will not join them in being corrupt. Oh, my business will collapse. Yes, let it collapse. Just like for Joseph went to jail, let your business collapse. And then watch to see what God will do with your collapsed business. Because you are doing it in order to please God. So it means everybody running business may be running it unethically. And even you have already lost several businesses because of it. But you stick with it. Whatever happens. Verse 27, whatever happens, it doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter what's around it. It doesn't matter what the consequences will be. Stick with what would Jesus do and do it. But of course, the worst case scenario, like we saw earlier, one of the principles, the worst case scenario, is that you'll be killed. Be ready for that. You'll be killed for keeping to your principles, for keeping to your ethics. If that happens, you go home to be with the Lord. You know, David said, I've been young, now I'm an old man. I've never seen the righteous forsaken. Somebody who sticks to live a life worthy of the gospel. According to David, he always have provisions. You may not become a billionaire, although you could, but you certainly will be a success in your calling if you learn this principle. Not to give excuses at all. A man of no excuses. And I think that's something that you need to ask yourself. No excuses. Whatever happens, no excuses. Don't blame the time. Don't blame. Stick with it. Do you want to regard yourself as a success? What we are learning is that you should not be two people. You should be the same person, irrespective of circumstances. Situational ethics, not a place to go. For you, the way your wife sees you, the way your children see you, the way your employer sees you, the way the strangers see you, the way they see you in the church, is exactly the same. Because you are consistent. You have a man of integrity. It's called a man of integrity because he is integrated. He's not two people in one. I think that's what the verse 20 is actually telling you. You cannot be one time very religious. The next time, you have nothing to do with God. No. If you're that type of a person, 3 problems. Number 1, you will not be pleasing to the Lord. Number 2, you are not predictable. People don't know how to deal with you. So they start avoiding you. You can't keep friends when you are not a man who is consistent. And then number 3, not only have you displeased the Lord, not only are you going to lack friends, you will not realize your success. So no excuses is a very important thing to think about. And my prayer is that that's something that you will take seriously. Then in verse 28, the verse is saying, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you, this is a sign to them that they will be destroyed, but that you will be saved. And that by God. Verse 29, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. So, here, the Bible is telling us very clearly that you will not be frightened because of enemies. And because they will be there, enemies. And it's very important that you don't concentrate on your enemies. If you really want to if you really want to be a success, know how to handle enemies. Because they'll be there. Maybe the word is not just enemies, it's people who oppose you. And if you don't learn how to deal with the people who oppose you, there will be trouble. And you need to ask yourself, is that something you deal with? You know, there are people who want everybody to be a friend. They hate it. They try to please everybody. And when they don't please them, they feel paralyzed. That will be something that ensures you never succeed. You must know how to handle opposition. And you should not be surprised when there's opposition. Unfortunately, sometimes the opposition comes from your own parents. Or sometimes the opposition comes from your own children. Or sometimes the opposition comes from your own siblings. And that's much more difficult. But if you stick with your calling, there will be opposition at one time or the other. People will succeed. And people don't give up because of opposition. People don't compromise in order to please those who are opposed. You know, you can't accomplish much when you are a coward. You don't want to confront people who are different from you, so you like to avoid confrontation, and therefore you have to compromise. You need to come to where you are clear. The worst enemy can do is just kill you. And if he did, you end up in a better place in heaven. So you therefore don't start. Your opposition does not worry you. Number two, to be aware of what this verse is saying, that finally there'll be victory. Not because you are bright or better, but by God. Isn't that what he's saying? These are signs to them, these people in the opposition, that they will be destroyed. That's Philippians 1 verse 28. The opposition will be destroyed, but that you will be saved. And that by God. In other words, you need to be aware. Whoever opposes you opposes God, because they are the apple of God's eye. And if you truly are apple of the God's eye, he is not up against you alone. He's up against your God. And there's no way he can win against him. Without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you, you'll be able to carry out your mind, do what needs to be done, irrespective of the circumstances. Isn't that the example you have in Daniel? He is told, no, you can't worship. He just goes to his window, kneels facing Jerusalem, and prays. So when they want to catch him, they knew they would. They even talk about it earlier. I know how to catch him. This guy can never compromise on issues of prayer. Doesn't simply be afraid of us. But he has found his match. He just did it again. He knew God can protect him, and God did from the lion's den. So, if you live a frightened life, frightened by opposition, you will not be a success. Remember, those who oppose you will never be the winners. God is saying you'll be the winner. Jesus is God. Jesus is your Lord. Jesus has always been victorious and will always be victorious. But you know, the devil is no match for Jesus. Why? Because Jesus created the devil. So how can the creator and the creation ever be in the same weight bracket? Not possible. So the devil will certainly lose. Since your enemy may be used by the devil, since the devil will lose, even your enemy will lose. Look at verse 29 again. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. So this idea of not fearing your enemies means you don't fear the consequence. And sometimes it will put you in a lot of trouble, but you know God will be with you in trouble, and he has promised you are going to be a success in whatever it is that you are actually doing. So, learn how to handle your enemies. Expect to have opposition and know how to handle them. How do you handle them? By knowing that what they can never do to you is kill you and you go to heaven. How do you handle your enemies? By knowing you are not alone in handling the enemies, that God is with you, that your enemies are also God's enemies. Number 3, knowing He has promised you success Himself. You know, we finish with verse 30 of the book of Philippians chapter 1. Verse 30 says, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now hear that I will have struggle, diligence. The final principle we are looking at is the principle of diligence. Diligence. God says He will bless the work of our hands. Work. You know, some people think work is a curse, but it's because they haven't read the Genesis properly. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 was well before the fall of man and the curse. And yet in Genesis 2:15, he is being told the man was placed in the garden to do what? To work it. So work was created much earlier than the fall of man. We don't work as a curse. We work because we are created to work. And that's you need to have a good attitude to work. A good attitude to struggling, to working hard. Laziness, not biblical. You can't expect success with the laziness. I keep telling people that there are more verses against drunkenness. There are more verses against dreading about laziness than drunkenness. Yet drunkenness, people condemn very easily. Laziness, we seem to accept people who are lazy. No. You can't hope to be a success when you don't pull your weight. When you are trying, instead of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest, it is 6 days of rest and 1 day of work. It isn't right. So you need to structure your day so that you are working in order to progress your calling. With diligence, you put enough work, enough number of hours, but you also work it out smartly. With clarity of what you want to achieve. It's not just working. No. It has to be work related to your calling. It has to be work that is productive, that is profitable, that is useful in helping mankind. So I think it's an issue you need to deal with it. You know, Paul is saying that the way you gain success in whatever you do, you put your hand to do, is to ensure you don't do it in half measures. You do it fully. You strive. The word he's using is strive or struggle. Yes, there's a time for rest. And it's important to ensure that you have not less than a month of rest in a year. Not less than 8 hours of sleep. It's important to have rest. But rest should be earned. You should have worked in order to rest. Could people describe you as a guy who strives, who struggles, who ensures they put in their weight in the work? Are you taking serious steps in order to ensure that you are able to reach the objectives and you are calling? If not, then you can't be much of a success. So diligence is an important aspect if you really want to be a success. And you need to find out whether you are. So since you are going through the same struggle, in other words, Paul was saying that the Philippians are not lazy. They are involved in the struggle. And the struggle is a struggle for the gospel, which they felt God for. And they're saying, I had the same type of struggle. And I still have the same struggle. In other words, there's no end to it. It is something you need. Laziness must be avoided for the whole view of your life, even when you're in old age. Contribute to your food, yes, because the Bible is saying, if you don't work, don't eat. But beyond that, because that's the real minimum, work in order to serve others and help them. Produce enough to feed others, not just yourself. That's what we are talking about when you talk about success. And these are principles we need to follow if we really want to live a life of success. May the Lord help us to truly be committed to a life of success.